in Africa, we don't really have that culture of publishing regulatory sanctions or regulatory penalties. I mean, when you compare it with other jurisdictions like maybe the UK, you almost get some of those notices every day, right, or like every week, right, where they say, oh, the FCA has really just fined Sterling Bank this amount of money for failure in their money laundering controls, right? But in Africa, it's not as widely publicized, and you don't really get those kind of regulatory actions in public. And I believe that some of the reasons is, of course, to manage reputational risk, right? But I mean, infrequently you get some of those news that will just come and just see, oh, there's a fine here, there's a board sanction there or something like that. And some of those examples, I'm trying to think of one that will come readily to mind. I really do not want to name names, right? But I'll talk about the microfinance banks, revocation of license of microfinance banks that happened, was it last year or 2022? Now, what happened there was, as at, I think, was it 2018 or 2019, the CBN released a circular requiring all microfinance banks to increase their shareholder capital to a certain limit, right? Um, Depending on your tiers. So there are a good number of fintech products that are currently run on microfinance bank licenses. Look at Kuda Bank, for instance. Kuda Bank is a microfinance bank. It's a national microfinance bank in Nigeria. Ayowo is a microfinance bank. Ruby's was a microfinance bank. I don't know if that's still up. And a whole lot of fintech products in Nigeria rely on microfinance bank licenses. So when that circular came out, of course, the next thing to do is trying to put yourself in compliance with the circular before before the deadline that has been provided. Now, the CBN extended that deadline, I think, twice, right? I mean, this is something that has been coming from way back in 20, I don't know if it was 2019 or 2020. I can't really recall the year it started, but a fair number of microfinance banks did not comply within that period. Some of them, of course, due to a difficulty in raising the funds. Some of them, probably due to a failure of compliance. I really do not know. I can't tell the reason, right, from their own end. But aside from that, there are also other requirements for, okay, you need to keep an anti-money laundering, countering financing of terrorism program, and also file some reports and all that. So I think everything boiled together to a point where the CBN just put out a list of microfinance banks that they had revoked their licenses. Unfortunately, I think Ayowo was one of those banks that was affected. Because I believe they must have had like some other compliance issues, but some of this may have played part in the revocation of that license. I know they had a deposit, a bank run kind of situation as well, where customers could not also withdraw their funds. This led to revocation of license, like I said, right? And that's one of the major consequences of non-compliance. Right? I mean, licenses are not cheap. Licenses come at a cost as well. So when you do not comply and you lose your license, you're losing some serious financial resources as well. But beyond that, there's also some reputational risk that comes with it. For instance, if your company's license was revoked and you go to another country, right, and you try to get a license there, some of those countries do some very serious due diligence, and if they see that your license has been revoked as well before, they will be asking additional questions or putting you on a wait list, saying, I mean, that's a high risk kind of candidate for this license. So some kind of reputational damage could also come from issues like that. Another thing is, I mean, you're going to incur a lot of financial cost if you do not comply, right? So we'll see some fines, regulatory fines, and penalties. Unfortunately, like I said, they are not really as publicized as they're not really publicized as you see in other jurisdictions. So it's hard to like pinpoint to one that, oh, this regulator find this or find that. So that's hard. I think another example I can give you is in relation to the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. Like I said earlier, if you're trying to provide a digital lending service, you need to register with them. They will ask you for some documents and all that. We started to see some regulatory action on that end as well. I think they even moved against the likes of Sokolon and some, I think, Okash and some other digital lending service providers like that to use a fair name for them, right? That's something that could potentially happen. That has happened in the past as well. We've also seen cases where the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission has written to Play Store, that's Google, or App Store, that's Apple, to ask them to disconnect digital lending service providers in Nigeria that are not on their list of registered practitioners. So that's another thing that, I mean, that's another example that I can give. For data protection compliance as well, I can also give you the example of the Nigerian Data Protection Commission issuing fines on banks and financial service providers that are non-compliant with the provisions of the Nigerian Data Protection Act and other data protection regulations in Nigeria. So there are some of these sparse examples. They are not as publicized as we would like, because that is what would encourage people to take their compliance more seriously. They happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, they happen. Maybe they are not publicized. I mean, I've seen an instance where there was one that was publicized and then taken down within maybe 1 hour, right? So these things happen. Regulatory fines happen. Regulatory penalties happen. Revocation of licenses happen. Disconnection of your application from your publishing store, app store, play store, it happens, right? Maybe not as publicized enough, but they happen. So it's really, really great to keep your compliance and tend to your compliance programs, really. Yeah.